Good morning. It's Mike Head again from Ethical Screening. And unlike previous ones, instead of talking to someone from the investment world, I'm talking to somebody whose organization feeds into our research process. So if you can introduce yourself, Rob, tell us about Rob, the organization you work for, and that whole story. And I'll just sit here and nod. And then after about half an hour, we'll press the stop button and we'll be done.
Perfect. Well, thank you firstly, Mike, for having me. My name's Dr. Rob Branston. I'm the co-director of the Tobacco Control Research Group at the University of Bath. And I also happen to be a senior lecturer in business economics in the School of Management, also at the University of Bath. Now, what that all basically means is that both myself and my colleagues do various bits of work around tobacco control, as the name of our group implies. So what we're looking to do is really hold the tobacco industry accountable for the great harms that it does to society and work out what policies governments can put in place to minimise and ultimately eliminate those harms.
And is it the university in isolation? Do you collaborate? Are there other bodies with whom you work?
Yes, so tobacco control is a global field. So there is a sort of a team at the University of Bath, but there are also other teams at different universities across the UK and indeed across the world. And we work not only with those other academic partners, but we also work with industry practitioners such as Cancer Research UK or Action on Smoking and Health in the UK context, but also other sort of similar bodies at a global context, like the World Health Organization, for example, as we try to sort of take this almost David versus Goliath type of battle to the sort of the global tobacco industry and the harms they create, not just in the UK, but across many markets across the globe.
And also work in conjunction with the NHS?
Our group doesn't work directly with the NHS because we work on tobacco control rather than directly on things like tobacco cessation, where the NHS would work. But there are certainly other groups and other parts of the university that work with the NHS. And the difference is the NHS tends to work on sort of treating tobacco, either the addiction itself or the harms that it creates, treating lung cancer, etc. Whereas what our goal is to address the use of tobacco products. So there is a sort of a different focus in what we do, and therefore where the sort of policy interventions would exist in terms of society.
And how long has the organization existed and how long have you been involved with it?
The Control Research Group has been at the University of Bath for about 20 or so years. I have been at the university for about the same amount of time, but I only started working on tobacco control in about 2010, so about 15 or so years ago.
Has it changed a lot? Because obviously I'm old enough to have been a smoker, yay, and to remember that there was a time when everything was sponsored by tobacco companies, from rugby league to Formula One to anything that you could possibly put a poster on, and now it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I think you pointed to how it's changed. I think slowly over time we have been winning more and more small victories. So, I remember when the smoking ban came in pubs. When I was first at university a student, it would be very common that you would go out, people would be smoking all around you. You would come home and you would absolutely reek of tobacco smoke, even though you and your immediate sort of friends hadn't necessarily been using those products. So that is one illustration of many as to how the environment in which we work has been changed. We can say tobacco products now are no longer visible in shops in the UK because display bans have come in. We can see that you're not to smoke in cars with children now because there's a ban on sort of smoking with, minors present. We have seen the price of tobacco go up massively in the shops thanks to deliberate government tax policies. So there's been a whole host of these sort of incremental improvements in regulation that are designed to make smoking harder, less appealing, less socially acceptable. But yet we still see millions of people continue to smoke every day in the UK. Hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people smoke globally every day. So tobacco as a problem has not gone away. It is simply less sizable than it was previously. But it should be remembered the cost of tobacco use is increasing all the time. So the cost of NHS treatment has gone up over time. So, for every one smoker, the cost is perhaps greater now than it was in the past. So even though there are less smokers, the problem is still very much a live one that we do need to think about as a society and take further actions about.
I mean, you shouldn't get me started on smoking and kids in cars because the three of us with two parents who smoked 40 a day driving on holidays across Europe to Switzerland with both of them sitting in the front smoking away like chimneys.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, you've experienced firsthand how a lot of these things that, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago were sort of routinely done. Now we know the harms that are created and know it's just not acceptable to do those kinds of things. And, that is one of the biggest changes we've seen. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. It might not happen so much in the UK, but other countries don't have such bans. So, a lot more needs to be done to protect the world from the perils of tobacco, to make sure that your story is not repeated anywhere.
It was a glorious moment actually when my niece and my nephew's wife were both pregnant at the same time, and my mum said that she smoked all the way through all three pregnancies and made the foolish comment, and it was fine, and that they had just looked at us and said, "Are you sure?" So the thing that's really striking is everybody knows in their conscious mind that smoking's a bad idea, and yet it's still so insidious. How do they do it?
Well, I think there are two sort of aspects to a good answer to that question. The first answer is the wider context. Making tobacco products such as cigarettes is incredibly profitable. Now, I've got a statistic from my own sort of research from a number of years ago, and that is that the world's six biggest cigarette manufacturers in 2018 made combined profits of 55 billion American dollars. Now, that is an astonishing sum of money, $55 billion. Now, okay, that statistic is a few years old, but the basic story wouldn't be very different if we had the numbers from the most recent year. Now, the point of that is an awful lot of money, and that concentrates the mind rather. Making tobacco products is profitable not only in the total volume of profit, but also on the profit they make per sale. In the UK, long-time market leader Imperial Brands has been known to make profit margins of up to 70%. So for every £100 they get to sort of keep, having paid their tobacco taxes, £70 of that would be approximate sort of operating profit. So tobacco companies make a large amount in total and make a large amount on each sale. Now that is important for two reasons. Firstly, it means they want to keep doing this thing, because how do you make that volume of profits in any other business? It's incredibly difficult. And secondly, it gives them the resources to fight tooth and nail to maintain that position. So every time a new regulation is announced or proposed, the industry goes into sort of overdrive to fight those new rules and regulations to try and keep the market as it is to protect those profits. So firstly, profits are the driver of behavior, but secondly, they also give a lot of resource for wider industry actions to keep themselves as part of the story. So that is why they sponsor so many events. That is why they have so many lobbyists. They want to make sure that they're part of the story. They want to make sure their name is out there. They want to make sure they resist all regulations. And, for many years, I suppose tobacco could have been considered as the bad guy. And most recently, they now have this narrative that they call harm reduction. They say, well, we know cigarettes are a problem and they're harmful, and that's why we're producing all of these other products in the sort of broader tobacco market space. So people have a choice of using something that is going to be less detrimental to their health. And therefore, they say they're part of the good guy solution. They are part of the solution to the problem that they themselves have created. So I think that's a sort of a long, involved answer of saying it's about money, and they use that money to try and make sure they continue to be recognized names, and that means they've used branding, marketing strategies over many years. Whenever one door closes, we ban advertising on TV, they start sponsoring Formula One cars. When that avenue becomes more difficult, they start paying social media influencers. So it's all about a deliberate choice. It's all about using their vast resources to make sure that they continue to be high profile and continue to be able to earn these vast profits.
It's interesting because although it's different, in a way, it feels like them sort of trying to pretend that they're the good guys, etc. It feels a little bit like the oil industry saying, "Look at what we're doing on renewables, and we're going to help you." And you can't land at an airport, although obviously I don't fly, without seeing some advert from from an oil talking about their green credentials and the like. And you think, because obviously that's really the direction you're traveling in, and honestly, you're not.
Well, I mean, you could make that comparison, but I always come back to the point that tobacco products, even when used as directed by the manufacturer, will harm your life expectation and will harm your health up to that point. So any of these products, even in the wider nicotine space, are still known to do harm to humans when consumed. So these are products that we don't need as a society. They unambiguously cause us problems. Now, you could talk about oil companies, but there are, synthetic oil products. There are, some need for these products, I think, in society. It would be unreasonable to think we could turn off using our cars overnight. So I think there are some important differences between those industries. But absolutely the parallel there, is somewhat concerning because, on the one hand, they're making harmful products, on the other hand, they're saying how great they are, and clearly that applies to both industries.
It was more about the greenwashing, health washing than about saying, one against the other. You mentioned about tobacco taxation, which is not something that's as widely known. Do you want to briefly touch on tobacco taxation? Because everyone sees the cost of a packet of cigarettes, but is that the totality of it?
Well, I mean, firstly, tobacco taxation is my own area of research, so I could talk about that quite extensively. So do stop me if I get too carried away. But I think the bottom line is with tobacco taxation, it's widely regarded as being the most effective tobacco control measure. And that is simply because whenever you put tobacco taxes on tobacco products, the price in the shop goes up, and most consumers will respond to price signals. When tobacco is more expensive, less people will start and more people will get a strong nudge and strong signal that they should quit that sort of deadly habit. In the UK, we're very lucky. We have had very good tobacco tax policies over a number of years, and that has slowly increased the price of tobacco products to send a strong signal that these are problematic sort of things that people should not be consuming. So now, if you go to a shop in the UK, 20 cigarettes will cost anywhere between about £12 and £18. So they're quite expensive. But that sort of pricing should also tell you the industry tries their very best to undermine the intended impact of tobacco taxes. They have a deliberate choice of having some cheaper brands on the market as well as those expensive brands. So what we've found is although tobacco taxes are effective, they're not as effective as they could be because the tobacco industry looks to minimize the impact of them with various pricing strategies, such as this idea of sort of cheaper brands versus expensive brands. They've played many games over time. They've changed the number of sticks in a pack. So instead of putting the price up, you get 19 sticks instead of 20 in a pack. And, consumers don't notice necessarily. So, they're not stupid, that they know tax works and they try their very best to undermine that.
Do they tax in the similar way to alcohol, that the stronger the cigarette, the higher the tax, or is it just a blanket tax on all tobacco products?
So effectively, it's a blanket tax, and that is because when it comes to strength, tobacco products, broadly speaking, are equally as deadly. So in the old days, they used to try and sell what they called light cigarettes.
Mhm.
Now, these were just a different sort of formulation of tobacco leaf, so it perhaps felt slightly less harsh to smoke, but it made no difference to life expectancy. Smokers tended to compensate how they use those products. So it might change what you died of, but it wouldn't change your expected lifespan. So it's not like alcohol taxation where beer has less tax than vodka because it is sort of less alcoholic. That does not apply in tobacco for very good reasons. The only difference is different tobacco products are taxed in different ways. So cigars are taxed differently to cigarettes. and sort of loose tobacco for rolling your own cigarettes are taxed differently to factory-made cigarettes.
That's very interesting because the perception is that if you, because my parents were proper smokers, senior service and players Navy cut, no filters, none of that nonsense,
Yeah,
proper
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 hardcore.
stuff.
Yeah.
But the perception as a one-time smoker was that if you had silk cut, that was supposedly a, but in fact, what you're saying is that in terms of life expectancy and health outcomes, it doesn't matter whether you're smoking the full fat or the half fat, it's still going to kill you. It just might do it in a different way.
That is exactly true, and that is why in the UK they were no longer able to sell brands with certain descriptors such as light, because that implied that they were in some way less harmful, and that is simply not true. And that's also, in fact, true of cigarette filters. There would be this perception that filters will make the product less harmful and will filter out all of the tar and the badness, but that is equally not true. All of those bad things still go into the lungs and will still cause problems. So one of the current suggestions within tobacco control is that cigarette filters should be banned because they do not enhance life and they actually help people to smoke. They make it less harsh. They give this false impression, and therefore, it's an unhelpful thing that companies can do.
Good Lord, yes. Because I can remember stealing mother's senior service and getting little bits of tobacco to take. Oh dear. The other one that fascinates me, and I spoke to you about this before, was that tobacco companies still manage to get themselves involved in events. I was at a sustainable investment event in the summer where one of the leading tobacco companies was there as a platinum sponsor. And how how is it? Should it be? Are there rules there?
Well, I mean, I would say unambiguously no. Why would anybody want to be associated with a company whose products quite deliberately kill many people? Now, by that, I don't mean tobacco companies go out of their way to kill people on purpose. Clearly, they want people to be alive to smoke as long as possible.
Hmm.
But they certainly know their products are deadly when used as intended, and they continue to make them. So I would question why anybody would want to engage with a tobacco company. But it comes back to my previous answer. Firstly, money. They are very flush with cash and are very happy to spend that money. So if you are willing to take that blood money, there's plenty available for you. And secondly, although we have international treaties that prevent governments and sort of government-allied organisations engaging with the tobacco industry, that does not apply to private society. So you as an individual can engage with the tobacco industry if you so wish. So that is where there is a role for wider society to sort of really think about, do they want to engage with the tobacco industry? Part of the industry's strategy is to normalize itself, to want to have this reputation as being a positive company that's trying to help society rather than the true reflection, which I think should be that these are companies that are causing harms and problems to society. So,
How,
sorry.
how did you feel when Rishi Sunak proposed that there would be this ban coming in on smoking at certain ages and the like? Was that something you saw coming, and were you surprised that it was pulled?
Well, we didn't see it coming. I mean, to have such a good piece of legislation coming from a conservative government that was sort of traditionally more free market in sort of in nature was surprising, but I wholeheartedly supported that bill, and I actually gave evidence at the House of Parliament in support of that bill as part of the sort of parliamentary process. And the reason is simple. Something like two-thirds of long-term smokers will die prematurely because of smoking. And most people who start using tobacco products regret that choice because it is so addictive and very hard to quit. So protecting our young people from even starting that habit, I think, is an incredibly wise course of action, because making it very clear that these are products that you should not use and you should never use them, I think sends the strongest message. Whenever I've sort of talked to people who smoke, one of the comments I've often heard about was, well, if it was that bad, they should just ban it. They should stop us using it. And that is effectively the idea with a generational ban. Let's stop you using it before you even start.
Yes, it's an odd thing, isn't it? Do you encounter the industry? Do you ever sort of have any interaction with the tobacco industry?
So we have a policy of non-engagement. So we would never appear on a policy platform or a debate with the tobacco industry, because to do so would risk legitimizing them as a partner, or would in some way suggest they are equal, or would suggest that they are reasonable to engage with. The point is, these are individuals who produce a product that kills people, and they should be treated as such, and therefore we do not engage with them directly.
The
Now, they
reason,
are always keen to try and engage with us. If we were to
yeah,
attend a conference, people who are from the industry, or or who are what we would call industry allies, will try and talk to us, but we try and avoid doing so, because again, they are part of the problem, not part of the solution. The only exception to that is that we do attend the company annual general meetings. So I personally own 10 shares in Imperial Brands. I hold those shares not for financial benefit, but just to allow me to attend the AGM, where we can go and ask some questions in a sort of public setting, and understand what the industry is doing and why they're doing it. So that is the only time I suppose we would engage with the industry, but then it is only, in a purely business way. We're not sort of there chatting and having a nice cup of tea and a biscuit over the meeting. It's very much a, can we ask some questions about your activities and ask why you're doing what you're doing in certain markets?
I I really asked because I wondered if you go and do any of them smoke.
That has been asked at the annual general meeting. The response we have is somewhat evasive, but they do imply at least some of the board use some tobacco products, but they won't say who uses what.
That'd
And
be
they don't
great.
say they all use them.
That would be great, wouldn't it? Alongside their diversity reporting would be number of board members who smoke, number of employees who smoke, etc.
Well, I think it would be a really interesting stat, and I think it would be fascinating if it's not 100%.
Yes,
Um,
because why wouldn't you? Because surely they'd get staff discount. They could even get the rejects and the seconds off from the factory floor.
well, I mean, the thing to remember is tobacco products are incredibly cheap to make.
Yes,
So, it wouldn't cost the company much to even allow board members to have as many products as they like. I do remember uh, a story that I was told by a long-standing member of the tobacco control community, and he would be exploring, the issues of what people involved in the company do in terms of tobacco products. And I remember in the 80s they tried to launch what they considered to be a lower harm product, and it didn't take off commercially, so it was pulled from the market. But they made a big supply for the directors who would start in using those products. And their comments was, we might sell this expletive, but we don't use it. So, the industry knows, I think, how harmful its products are. So I would be surprised if there were that many, smokers of traditional cigarettes within the companies these days. But who
indeed.
knows? They won't tell you. So,
They
perhaps I'm wrong.
they won't. It would be a great idea if all of their AGMs had to be outdoors so that everyone was forced to smoke.
Well, indeed, although I probably wouldn't want to attend, even if it was outdoors in that sense, but it would be interesting.
Yes. And then we're not going to do it because it would take another hour. We could talk about the environmental and social negatives associated with the production, because those are pretty horrendous as well at the beginning of the supply chain rather than at the developed market end of the purchasing.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads we could say about that, but the one key point I would make is people often talk about tobacco and try to use as a sort of a smokescreen, if you like, the supply chain. So that might be, oh, you can't have tobacco control because it's going to affect the local corner shops, or you can't have tobacco control because it's going to affect the poor tobacco farmers. But actually, most of those arguments just don't hold water. Tobacco farming is not a route out of poverty in a low and middle income country. And equally, tobacco revenues are not a source that keeps corner shops afloat. They make very little profit from tobacco products. And it really just speaks to the industry's desire to try to, to have a good image in society, to say, oh, well, we're looking after our farmers and we're looking after our retailers. But actually, they don't do a whole lot at all. There's so many stories about how poor farmers actually get trapped in poverty because they grow tobacco leaf rather than any glorious story about how it helps them thrive and sort of move forward.
Indeed. Um, think that's plenty. This has been very useful. And it's a window into a world that we know about, but we don't know enough about. That's really very useful. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I mean, what I will say about tobacco is that the more you learn, the more interesting you find it, and the more you want to learn. I mean, my own background was not in tobacco, and I only sort of started researching it happenstance by talking to a colleague at the university about a particular piece of work she was doing. And ever since then, I've been slowly drawn in to learn more and do more about the industry for all of the reasons we've just discussed. So I would encourage you and your colleagues and your listeners to do some more research and work out for themselves how damaging the industry is.
And I'm guessing you just get the more you learn, the more cross you get.
Yes. I mean, there are so many anecdotes that I could tell you. I mean, why do we need to add things into cigarettes that make the nicotine more available and the tobacco more addictive? That has been widely done for many years, so that makes me angry. The marketing that they do to young people, to people in low and middle income countries makes me angry. The question I've always wanted to ask someone who works in the tobacco industry is how do you sleep at night? Knowing that you kill 8 million people at a global level every year, how do you sleep soundly?
Well, that's a cheerful note to end on. Thank you very much. But I say it fascinates me that the whole thing about it, nothing about it seems right, and yet it continues to, and it is, as you said, partway through, it comes right down to the simplest thing, which is it's about the money.
It's always about the money, unfortunately, but I think it's very telling. If we invented cigarettes today, they would be quickly banned. We're very quick to ban, lots of sort of class A drugs, aren't we? Because they're problematic. And I think we should keep in mind that tobacco products would be very much in that category if discovered today. And we only have them as legal products because of this quirk of history that they've been around for more than 100 years and therefore are very hard to ban immediately. And that's why we need all these incremental rules to get us to the point where they can be banned effectively.
And they would be Class A as well, wouldn't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they kill, as I said, two-thirds of long-term users. They're really deadly. I think the average smoker loses something like 10 years of life expectancy. There are many grounds on which they would be banned.